Get our adjustments made here. Glad to see Brother and Sister Bates coming in. We were beginning to wonder. But we're glad to see you. Good morning. And I'm glad to see you too. Put my glasses on so I can. Well, usually I take my glasses off so I can see you. My glasses are basically focused for just reading. But from time to time. I've tried the gum. I've decided not to use the gum. So keep right on using the water anyway. It's the most effective the way it is. This morning I'd like to take just a little bit of different twist. I'd like to always make us aware of God and how that, and prepare our minds so that we can be thinking in terms of God and dealing with the fact that He created the world and created us and provided us with everything that we need, that we so far have not run short of as far as the sustenance of our lives. So I'd like to deal with a psalm or two. And I'd like for you to turn with me. I believe it's to the 34th psalm. And read a couple of psalms here to help us prepare our minds for them. Let's see, what is today? This is the 11th, 55. So I think it's 40, must be 45 and 43. '43 and 44. It is 43 and 44. The reason why I said what day is today is the 11th. I subscribe to a little exercise, and I really suggest it to you. And that exercise, I've mentioned it before, and I'll keep mentioning it from time to time. I read a psalm, 5 psalms, and 1 proverb a day. Anytime during the day, but I usually start my day out with reading a proverb and 5 psalms. I picked up on that particular habit for many, many years ago, but I started exercising it within the last 2 years. And I really feel that I am being benefited greatly from this little exercise. It doesn't take long, about a half an hour. It all depends on how fast you read and whether you're reading with comprehension or just reading words. But if you're reading with comprehension, it'll probably take you about 35, 40 minutes to read 1 psalm or 1 proverb and 5 psalms. And so today, if you were to start out today doing it, this is the 11th, so read Psalm number 11. There's 31 psalms, or 31, I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed up. Proverb 11. There's 31, and there's 30 in one month and 31 in another month. So you double up maybe, or just start all over again. Then read, pick up with Psalms 55 and read 51 through 55. And so that will get you up to date. If you start tomorrow, read 56 through 60. And that'll be your 5 psalms. You can pick up anywhere and do it anytime you want to, but that's the exercise that I try to do. So this is the 11th, and I read Proverbs 11. And then I slip over and read Psalm. But Psalms 44 and 45 is 43 and 44 is one that I think that helps you get in the right spirit, get in the right frame of mind. That's the word I would like to, or the phrase I would like to say is frame of mind. We're studying God, we're thinking about God, and we want to be in the right frame of mind concerning God. So let's pick up with Psalm 43. Vindicate me, O God. I'm reading from the New International Version. You know that already, or I'm sure you presumed it. Vindicate me, O God, and plead my cause against an ungodly nation. Rescue me from deceitful and wicked men. You are God, my stronghold. Why have you rejected me? Why must I go about mourning, oppressed by the enemy? Send forth your light and your truth. Let them guide me. Let them bring me to your holy mountain, to the place where you dwell. Then will I go to the altar of God, to God, my joy and my delight. I will praise you with the harp, O God, my God. Why are you downcast, O my soul? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God. Now, notice there that I was neglectful in the punctuation, but don't be neglectful in your reading as far as the punctuation is concerned. It means a lot. And let's read verse 44. We have heard with our ears, O God. Our fathers have told us what you did in their days, in days long ago. With your hand you drove out the nations and planted our fathers. You crushed the peoples and made our fathers flourish. It was not by their sword that they won the land, nor did their arm bring them victory. It was your right hand, your arm, and the light of your face, for you loved them. You are my King and my God, who decrees victories for Jacob. Through you we push back our enemies. Through your name we trample our foes. I do not trust in my bow. My sword does not bring me victory, but you give us victory over our enemies. You put our adversaries to shame. In God we make our boast all day long, and we will praise your name forever. But now you have rejected and humbled us. No longer go out with our enemies. You made us retreat before the enemy, and our adversaries have plundered us. You gave us up to be devoured like sheep and have scattered us among the nations. You sold our people for a pittance, gaining nothing from their sale. You have made us a reproach to our neighbors, the scorn and derision of those around us. You have made us a byword among the nations. The people shake their heads at us. My disgrace is before me all the day long, and my face is covered with shame at the taunts of those who reproach and revile me, because of the enemy who has been on revenge. All this happened to us, though we had not forgotten you or been false to your covenant. Our hearts had not turned back. Our feet had not strayed from your path. But you crushed us and made us a haunt for jackals and covered us over with deep darkness. If we had forgotten the name of our God or spread out our hands to a foreign God, would not God have discovered it, since he knows the secrets of the heart? Yet for your sake we face death all day long. We are considered sheep to be slaughtered. Awake, O Lord, why do you sleep? Rouse yourself. Do not reject us forever. Why do you hide your face and forget our misery and oppression? We are brought down to the dust. Our bodies cling to the ground. Rise up and help us. Redeem us because of your unfailing love. I chose those because of the fact that the author of the Psalms definitely believes in the divine intervention, providence, and preservation of God. And it's so evident. No matter how you read the Psalms, they're always looking to the God, the creator of the world. But not only God, the creator of the world, but you'll see them making reference to Jacob, God of Jacob, Jacob the refuge. Last week I started out with, we believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he shows the psalmist, which is David. Most of the Psalms are written by David, not all of them. Some of them are written by Solomon, and some of them are written by other men of great faith too. And the thing is, we recognize the fact that God is setting himself up and helping us to know him and to trust him. And he's doing that with Abram, and I've been pointing that out with you over these last few weeks. Let's turn now to Genesis and pick up with our study of Abram. We've talked about the promise that God has given to Abram. We're going to see this emphasized once more here in 15th chapter. We talked about Melchizedek last week, which is covered in the 14th chapter of Genesis. We're talking now about Abram. Abram finds himself in a situation now. Does anybody remember how old Abram was when God came to him and he started out on this venture of his? You remember how old Abram was at that time? 75. He's now in 90, he'll point it out here in 15th chapter, just exactly how old he is. But he's been very, very patient. He's been waiting for the promise that God has given to him. He knows full well that it's going to be of his seed, and he knows full well that it's going to be Sarah. But we see that Sarah's not going to be able to be patient enough to and believe that it's going to be her, because she is of age now. She's in her 80s, and she's 10 years younger than Abram, and so she's in age. And I don't know too many 80-year-old ladies who would like to have a child at this stage of the game. But she's beyond age to have a child at this point, according to the scriptures anyway. And so as we reflect upon this, Abram is seeing the promise die. Every year and every day, Sarah does not become pregnant, doesn't conceive. Every year, Abram is losing faith, or he's becoming weary in his faith anyway. And so we see that this is the event that's being recorded here in the 15th chapter is bringing this particular fact out. Starting with verse 1. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, O sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, you have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. So he's becoming frustrated. The promise that he had been putting his hope on just seems to be dying. And that's the phrase that I think that we might want to hang on to. It is dying. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man, Eliezer, will not be your heir, but a son coming from your own body will be your heir. He took him outside and said, look at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Circle that, underscore it, do whatever you like to do, put it in your notes, whatever you do, ever how you do it. This is where God credits Abraham righteousness for his faith in the fact that God has promised him a child, and that truly his offspring over time will be so numerous you won't be able to count it any, as you can't count the stars when you go out on a clear night and see all those beautiful stars. This is the faith. This is the faith that God is crediting Abraham with. This is the faith that God is crediting you and me with. We are children of faith. And if we are children of faith, we are children of Abraham. The scriptures point that out in the New Testament. And we will be reading that if I don't tarry too long in developing this lesson. But we believe that God is saving us through Jesus. God has promised Abraham, you're going to have a child. And through your seed, the nations, the world will be blessed. Don't forget that phrase. The world will be blessed. That's what I tried to set us up with last Sunday afternoon in my sermon. I hope I will be able to fulfill next week. But anyway, this is the faith. It's faith that we believe in God, that we believe that God has established Jesus and his sacrifice for us, and that Jesus went to the cross, and in so doing, he offered a sacrifice that God accepts for the forgiveness of the sins of the world. Now, if you listened to the radio program this morning, you'd know, saved by grace. It was a beautiful lesson this morning. I make every effort to, again, one of my other exercises I do, I make every effort to listen to this radio program that we have arranged to have every Sunday morning. I just really loved this morning's lesson. It was saved by grace. And B.E. Howard had actually written this, and he had it in script, and so they reread it this morning. It was B.E. Howard's lesson, 1934. It was fantastic. Anyway, this is the faith. Abraham believed God. That's one of the reasons why I wanted us to start out with the Psalms, so that we can prepare our minds and get our minds in the right frame. We believe God. And we believe that God is saving us through Jesus, and that by obeying Jesus' commands, by being baptized for the remission of our sins, we rise to walk in a newness of life. And in so doing, God, as long as we walk in the light as he is in the light, Jesus' blood will continue to cleanse us, and God will continue to credit us with righteousness. Believe that. That's the faith. It's a similar faith to Abraham. Paul tells us it's the similar faith to Abraham. When we exercise that faith, we're exercising the same faith that Abraham had when God said, you will have a child by Sarah. Abraham believed it. And it tells us right here, God credited him with righteousness. And this is the event that Paul always refers to when he talks about Abram's faith. Now, it's important for us to recognize this is the very first event in Abram's life where his faith is credited as righteousness. Now later on, he's going to be adding circumcision. We're not ready for that just yet. It's coming up within the same venture here. And it is prior to being circumcised. So here is the faith. Now, the addition of circumcision. Was that in addition to the righteousness that was credited to Abram? No. That's the whole question. Circumcision comes later for a different reason. That's the point. That's the argument that that Paul wants to make when it comes to yours and our salvation. The addition of the Mosaic law, as we see after the children come out of Egypt, and as they prepare to go into the promised land, that God gives them the law of Moses and establishes the Aaronic priesthood. Did that change anything to what the promise was that God gave to Abraham? And it doesn't. What you and I need to recognize, the fact is that Abram was representative of the world's population. There was neither Jew, Gentile, Greek, barbarian. There's no indication here. God had pulled out Abram and made this promise to him without any distinction. And this is one of the points you need to recognize. He's representing the world, and God is saying to him that through his seed, he's going to bless the world. And so this is the point that we want to make. So we're not finished with this. I got a couple more orations coming. But I want you to recognize this. This is the first. And so it has recognized him as righteousness. Picking up at verse 7. God also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of Chaldea to give you this land to take possession of it. But Abram said, O sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? So the Lord said to him, bring me a heifer, a goat, a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Abram brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. So visualize this. This is what happened. He cuts the animals in half and say that this is the aisle. He puts one half of the animal there, and he puts the other half of the animal there. And he makes an aisle. And this is what is there. And he's chasing away the scavengers. He's chasing away all the birds that come down and want to devour these animals that he's cut in half. And so he's getting ready. God makes him do this for a reason. So verse 10, Abram brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. The birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. But I will punish the nations they serve as slaves, and afterwards they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants, I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates, the land of the Canaanites, the Canaanites, Kadamites, Hittites, Pezerites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, and Girgasites and Jebusites. Okay. Several things have happened here, and we're going to end up the class just discussing what took place here. God is making a covenant with him. What do we know about a covenant? It's a promise. You enter into a contract. He's making a covenant with him. This is the covenant that he honors even today. He isn't changing this covenant at all. This is the covenant that he makes, and he's sealing it with, anybody? He's sealing it with blood. Paul makes a big effort out of the fact that nothing that God ever does with the human being, he seals it with blood. What does he do when he establishes the Mosaical law? He sprinkles blood on everything. When they put the tabernacle together, what did they do? They sprinkled it with blood, inside and out. Everything is sprinkled with blood to seal the covenant. Nothing is sprinkled with, that is not sprinkled with blood, that God doesn't. So when Jesus dies on the cross, what happens? The new covenant is sealed with Jesus' blood. Nothing is done without blood. So he's making a covenant with Abraham. And he's saying to him, for sure. He does not swear with any other name, because there is no other name greater than his. He swears by his own word and his own name on this covenant. He's not going to break it. He is a covenant keeper. That's another avenue, but we'll talk about that later. God is a covenant keeper, and he wants us to be a covenant keeper in every respect. He wants us to be covenant keepers. So, he's made a promise. Now, we talked about, so as we visualize that, because here is God, Abram's fallen asleep, he wakes him up, and he says, I'm making this promise, this covenant with you. And he even tells him what the land is going to be. Why isn't he going to give him the land now? I promised to tell you when that happened, and it happened. God makes a statement. Why isn't he giving Abraham the land now? The what is not complete? The iniquities of the Amorites or the Canaanites are not complete. In other words, God does not feel justified at this point. God feels he has to be justified in doing what he does. And he wants us, because we'll argue with him, why are you ignoring the sins of David? Why are you ignoring the sins of all those other men who have gone before and they're in heaven? Why are you ignoring their sins and not punishing them for their sins? And so we'll argue him to be justified. Justify yourself. And the world is going to just argue, why, God, are you bringing the Israelites into this land? Because their iniquities are complete now. But why isn't God giving him the iniquities now, or the land now? Because the sins of the people who live there is not enough to justify it. So he's not going to chase them out at this point. They're not sinful enough. He's going to give them rope to hang themselves. Now, if you've read the history, you'll know that the latter end of the Israelites, before they're carried off into it's terrible to get old. My memory starts with a B. Babylon. They're carried away into Babylon. Why is God allowing Babylon to come in and carry Israel away? Their sins are so horrendous that the world is saying, look at your people. They're more sinful than the Canaanites that you kicked out of there. The world is complaining. They're saying, God, how can you justify yourself for kicking the Canaanites out of there when your people are living more horrendous, sinful lives than they did? That's hard to believe, isn't it? But they were. Israel was carried away first, and then Jacob was carried away second. Israel was worse because they had established a different form of worship to keep their people from coming down to Jerusalem to worship God the way God wanted them to worship. So Israel was carried away first. Now, just to give you the sides there. God is not giving Jacob this property, this land, for various reasons, but the primary reason is the Canaanites' lifestyle, their living is not sinful enough. He doesn't justify kicking them out at this point. So this is the reason. I tried to share with you why God doesn't just hand over the Israelites. But he doesn't. He's got a couple other things that he needs to be mindful of at this point. Do you see anything else in this passage? We got about 4 minutes. See anything else? We've talked about how that God is revealing himself. We talk about God, how that he tries to establish our faith. He uses signs, wonders, and miracles. But there is at least one more avenue that God uses to establish his existence, and that's prophecy. You see the prophecy here? His people will be enslaved. So here's that whole event about Joseph being carried away into Egypt, and how that Jacob then eventually goes into Egypt, and then how that they became slaves to the Egyptians, and how that God brings them out. How many years does it take for God to bring those people out? At 450 years. God tells for 400 years. He also tells us bringing them out with a reward or with treasure. Does God do that? So we have a prophecy that's involved here. And the prophecy is unlike that of us going down to the local palm reader and letting her tell us our fortune. God is telling him the fortune, isn't he? Notice what he says. And this is prophecy. And the natures of prophecy must take place. And we'll pick this up next week. Thank you for your attention. We'll talk about prophecy when we get back. See, I know how to put those things together too.